Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth and presumably final Indiana Jones film, directed by James Mangold and released this year. Now, the original film series, it's had its ups and downs. Like, Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981 and took the world by storm. It was originally directed by George Lucas, and it was another pairing between him and Harrison Ford, to which apparently originally Lucas didn't want to cast Ford, having already worked with him in Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, but then when he couldn't get Tom Selleck for the role, he eventually went back to Ford, and they managed to create a great relationship with these films. Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981, Temple of Doom in 1984, The Last Crusade in 1989, then things got a little rocky with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, and then this film released this year. Now, Harrison Ford is kind of getting on a bit. He is into his 80s now, and while he's not slowing down by any means, I mean, he's got two MCU roles coming up in the future, taking over from William Hurt as Thunderbolt Thaddeus Ross in Captain America: Brave New World and The Thunderbolts. This is presumably to tie up loose ends and finally retire the character of Indiana Jones. And as a person who was born and kind of grew up in the late 1990s and early 2000s, I did see these on TV, but I guess I didn't have quite the experience that everybody else did. Because I remember seeing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, and I honestly didn't think it was that bad. I actually thought it was kind of fun. But, yeah, there were elements of Dial of Destiny that did feel a bit like they were trying to make up for some of the mistakes of the past. And I think overall with this particular film, if you're an Indiana Jones purist, you're probably not going to like it. I know this film has been considered a box office bomb, but if you're a person who just likes the kind of action-adventure type movies, I think you're going to like this film fine. So what's the setup? Well, in 1944... Dr. Henry Jones Jr., better known as Indiana Jones, played by a CGI de-aged Harrison Ford, he's in Germany with a fellow archaeologist named Basil Shaw, played by Toby Jones. And they're mainly trying to retrieve an artifact from the Germans, from the Nazis, called the Lance of Longinus, only to discover that the artifact is in fact fake. However, they do discover one artifact that the Germans do actually have in their possession. That is a device called the Antikythera, better known as Archimedes' dial. Now, it's broken, but it's known that if you can find the two pieces and slot them together, then the Antikythera can countertake lesions in time and can be used for time travel. Now, they find it, but then eventually years later, Basil Shaw is shown to have somewhat become maddened by his research into the Antikythera. So he asks Indiana Jones to destroy it. He must make sure it's destroyed and it's never found. Now, by 1969, Henry Jones's life has slowed down quite a bit, partially because of his retirement from Hunter College, and also by the fact that a lot of his students are lacking interest now in archaeology, mainly due to the moon landings, which are shown to have just happened. To which it does sound roundabout kind of what happened at the time in the 1960s with space travel. That suddenly became the big new thing. And while there were some interest in stuff like archaeology and cowboys and the like, those were kind of seen less and less favourably as people started to look more to the stars. It's unfortunate, but it was just a period of time that happened. People are less interested in archaeology and more interested in science and space, which is unfortunate, but it is kind of clear to what's happened. And one thing that does actually fit into this film that you may or may not know is known as Operation Paperclip, which is that following the end of World War II, the USA and the USSR both ended up capturing some of the German rocket scientists who built Hitler's wartime missiles. And using that technology was how we ultimately mastered space travel, and how America ultimately landed on the moon. It was Nazi technology that got us there. And that's kind of how it links all together. Because Indiana Jones is approached by a woman named Helena Shaw, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and she is the daughter of Basil Shaw, who presumably by this time has passed away. Now, Indiana Jones himself is going through a little bit of a tough time. One, people's interest in archaeology is dwindling. Two, he's now retiring from Hunter College. And three, his wife, well, now his former wife, Marion Ravenwood, played by Karen Allen, is divorcing him due to a lot of factors, but the one that's really focused on is that the fact that their son Mutt is now, during the 1950s, he signed up for the British military, well, not the British, the American military, and was killed in the Vietnam War. So obviously both of them are going through grief, and she believes now that she has to break up with him. However, Indiana's life is made a bit more complicated when Helena, as I said, suddenly resurfaces, asking him for information and help on finding the Antikythera. While she claims at first she's just looking to do it just for the fun of it, it soon becomes clear she wants to do it mainly for the money, as she wants to sell it at an auction in Tangier. But they find themselves pursued, first of all, by the CIA, led by a woman named Mason, played by Shawnette Renee Wilson, but then also chased by a number of bad guys, led by a man named Jürgen Voller, played by Mads Mikkelsen. Now, Voller was previously a Nazi whom Jones had encountered in 1944, and he and his henchmen, played by the likes of Boyd Holbrook, Olivier Richards, and Martin McDougall, they want to find the Antikythera to repair it, because in a really kind of weird scheme, they want to use the Antikythera to travel back to 1939, to Sicily, in 1999, particularly Syracuse. Once they get to Syracuse in 1939, they then want to go to Munich, travel to Munich, and kill the Führer. Because they believe that if they kill the Führer, then they can appoint a new leader to the Germans in the 1930s, and ultimately correct the mistakes of the past. To which Indiana and Helena end up going on a mad chase to try and stop them, and encountering a load more characters, including Ronaldo, a diving buddy of Indiana's, played by Antonio Banderas, Sala, played once again by John Rhys-Davies, whom Indiana briefly meets up with, also a teenager who works with Helena named Teddy Kumar, played by Ethan Isidore, and, of course, Archimedes himself in the early years that he existed, played by Nasser Namazia. Now, I do think that with this film, while I thought it was fairly good, it was fairly evident that they were trying to correct some of the mistakes or some items that people didn't like from previous Indiana Jones films. For one thing, killing off Shia LaBeouf off-screen. To which I know that, while I personally didn't think he did that badly in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's fair to say that Shia LaBeouf's character of Mutt was one of the more divisive elements of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, so killing him off-screen, yeah, that was one thing they were trying to make up for his appearance in. But then there were also elements that I did actually think worked. For example, Ethan Isidore as Teddy Kumar. Now, you may disagree with me on this, but I personally thought they were trying to set him up to make up for Short Round. Short Round was a character who appeared in 1984's Temple of Doom, where he was played by Ke Huy Quan. And I did kind of feel like they were trying to set Teddy Kumar up to be the equivalent of Short Round. The only thing was, I think, from watching Temple of Doom previously on TV that I actually did think I preferred Kumar more, mainly because one of the big complaints about Short Round in Temple of Doom was that he could grow to be a little annoying. He was shouting every line and just kind of being an annoying kid, whereas this kid, he can be annoying at some points, but he's also fairly quiet and fairly reserved, and I do think he was an interesting character. Overall, I did think that this is a fairly good film. Is it one of the greats? Probably not, but then again, these films, the first three, the ones that we will actually consider the good ones, they all came out beyond my time, so I guess I'm just not a child of this particular series of films. Like, I didn't see the original three in theatres when they came out. I only saw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in theatres 15 years ago in 2008. I do have the DVD of it, and I have watched it since, but yeah, I guess that one of the reasons people didn't like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was that they felt that it went a bit too silly and it didn't live up to the great heights of the original trilogy. But then, as just a casual moviegoer, I found Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny to be really fun films. And ultimately, I do think that this story, I don't know, I think it works. One other thing I've seen people complain about a bit is that, specifically more with Temple of Doom, they say that with Dial of Destiny, one of the things it does get right is bringing back the Nazis. Like, the one film that didn't have Nazis as villains was Temple of Doom, and I gather people weren't really all that keen on it because of that. Of the original trilogy, while people do like the original three films the best, the one that they seem to like the least is, of course, Temple of Doom. But they think Indiana Jones does much better when he's facing off against Nazis. And this film does do that again. They do come up with a fairly interesting plan. But I think one of the things that people told me about the Indiana Jones franchise is that they're supposed to be big, bombastic adventure films. And you know what? Dial of Destiny, it turns it down one dial on the dial at least, but at the same time, I think you're going to enjoy this film. I mean, it's worth at least watching once. Have a look for yourselves and tell me what you think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Anyway, until next time, see ya.